All right, all right, all right. Welcome to Free Thinker Radio, KPFT Houston. Derek and I are broadcasting from remote locations. We're social distancing. God, I'm about tired of that word. We need something else for that.
Physical distancing, I think, is
We're distancing.
a better term some people prefer, because they're saying, it encourages us to not, to still be social, but to be physically apart. But yes, we're back here for another episode of Free Thinker Radio. We are broadcasting live on the Conscious Resistance YouTube, Facebook, Free Thinker Radio Facebook. And of course, some of you might be listening to this on a Friday afternoon on 90.1 KPFT Houston, which is where we broadcast every week, in addition to the other online places. And right now with KPFT, there's actually a spring fund drive going on right now, Micah. So everybody who appreciates the things that we can bring to you via the internet and via the FM radio, I really encourage you to visit kpft.org and go see if you can support in some way and help us stay on the air. Because although you might be listening to us through the internet, the reality is that this is a dual show. We're also broadcasting on the FM radio in Houston, the fourth largest city in the country, and we have the opportunity to affect the conversation and shape the minds in Houston, and we're very thankful for that. But in order for that to continue, places like KPFT have to exist. And so in order for that to happen, and for us to have commercial-free, corporate-free, none of that garbage type radio, we need your listener support. So please do visit kpft.org and let them know, if you decide to give, that you heard this via Free Thinker Radio, so we can stay on air and keep doing the things we love to do. Right, Micah? I know you enjoy this conversation.
Yeah, totally. That's totally right. And we're going to talk about that more. One point I try to make quick and move on with the show a little bit is that you see this, with regard to the big giants. You see Target will survive the coronavirus. The grocery stores will survive it. All these, so my point here is Clear Channel will survive it, etc. KPFT needed your help before, and they need your help even probably more so now. The building's closed. A lot of people have been out of their normal routine. I know a lot of people listen in their cars. So if you're hearing us on the internet, like Derek said, this is a multi-broadcast show, and we're thankful for it, and we're thankful for KPFT being around for 40 plus years, able to share some great music that's going to play out Friday. I know we're going to play Ganesha and more this show. We play a lot of music from all walks, all genres, so send us your music and let us know about it. And to everybody that supports, if you share this, thanks a lot, because just driving this up so we can reach people with both the station, the ideas, and the discussion. Because, right now, I love this software you've got, Derek. It's really, technology is scary, but it's also revolutionizes stuff. Here we are in different nations having this dialogue. We've got the live comments going from all the platforms. Like, how many platforms? Like, I already see people jumping up saying, hey, y'all, hey, everyone. And that means a lot, because I've seen people talk about the ideas, talk about the stories, and even ask about the music. So that's pretty sick. And I'm thankful for this, the ability to reach people like this. But at the same time, I can't wait to go to a show again. I see some of those are coming back here in Houston. Thank you. You'll hear about more and more of that on KPFT. In fact, we got a show we're not very much involved in. I don't even know any of the people that are going to be involved with it, but it's something I never saw before, and I have my reservations about it. It's a drive-in rave. What about that, Derek? I know you saw that.
Yeah. So, it's giving people something to do this weekend, right?
Yeah, and it's thinking outside the box in a crazy way.
Yeah, let's go ahead and we're going to put that story on screen for those who are watching. Drive-in rave in Houston. So tell me a little bit about this, Micah. You're the one who found this.
Yeah, for sure. Just one second. I need to actually get that article. I had it.
Yeah, I'll introduce it then.
Yeah.
So it says a drive-in rave is coming to the Houston area this Friday. So if you're listening on 90.1 KPFT on the radio right now, and you're into raving, after we air on 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock on Friday afternoon, go to this rave if you like. You do what you like, but it's called No Parking on the Dance Floor Texas, or just on the dance floor Texas, and it's got a couple of DJs or something. It's interesting. The concept, I think, is cool. Maybe now the time is right, because people are looking for things to do. And we're not going to get into the price or the sort of the details of it. If you want to find it, you can look it up. Just look up drive-in rave, no parking on the dance floor in Houston. Kind of an interesting concept. So something to get involved in if you're in Houston.
I do see more acts that we know showing up on Facebook. I guess I've been so busy with other things, I hadn't noticed that they were, not only doing the live streaming thing, but starting to see more performances. And I guess maybe the venues are keeping it down to 25% occupancy, which Lord knows how that can even be a profitable business model. But I think it's just some effort to do something in the face of this. And, we got a lot of authoritarians pulling people all kinds of directions on it.
Well, Micah, you mentioned that. I know we got quite a bit of Texas and Houston news to cover today here on Freethinker Radio, and in the second half of the show, we do have a theme we're going with, what we've been doing in recent episodes, and that is Bill Gates. And so I titled this episode is titled, "Will a Real Bill Gates Please Stand Up?" So we're going to get into that in the second half for those of you who are curious about that. But yeah, you speak about some businesses having to remain at 25% capacity. So as you guys are hearing this, we are in different nations. I'm still in Mexico, but I'll be home this weekend. So by next week, maybe we'll be recording together, and maybe soon KPFT will be open again. But it's just interesting because I'm hearing things about not just the States, but around the world where I don't really know how to put it in a nicer way other than sort of snitch mentality is taking over. And I've seen people sharing videos online, Twitter, elsewhere of one was a woman being shamed and screamed out of a grocery store because she didn't have a mask on. And look, I'm not even going to get into the whole science behind that or the debate around that. I'm just saying, if we're at the point now where because of a reaction to COVID-19 and everything happening here, people are kind of turning on each other. We've seen this previously with other incidents, but it's I don't know, it's kind of scary because I've seen some business owners, like you said, say if I don't open up now, I'm going to go out of business, and if I can only serve 25% capacity to people, I'm not going to be able to survive. And even if I reopen, I'll end up still going out of business, right? And so I just hope people really think about the different consequences, of these types of actions. And also for another perspective is here in Mexico, although there has been an order similarly issued by the state government, the vast majority of people have ignored it. And you might not like that, but they're doing so out of necessity. And some of them are doing so out of just their own desire to stay open. But out here in Mexico with a lot of poverty, there are people who literally cannot live with staying closed as a business. And so they don't. And they do so maybe at their own risk. Some of them choose to wear masks. Some of them ask all their customers to put hand sanitizer on, whatever. My point is people are going about this in different ways. And I hope that we really don't get to a point where if somebody chooses to open their business just to try to sustain themselves, or go out and enjoy themselves, even that their neighbors and friends are going to turn on them. That's I hope we're not moving into that period.
I've seen some absurd things with regard to that I don't think we have time to get into, but that might be something that we can get into in a future episode, maybe focus on for 15 minutes or something. Just the way that people have used this environment to make arguments. And I'm not talking about just the authoritarians, the Fed and the military and the CDC and all those things. I'm talking about, the people on Facebook and that sort of thing, and the crazy type of arguments and claims that you don't just see once, but kind of recur. I think that's an interesting thing to start noting in these sort of mass panic events or whatever you want to call it. One thing I will say is a lot of people were out on Bolivar and out in different beaches and stuff in Texas over Memorial Day, it looks like, from videos and photos I'm seeing. And I think that's kind of good because, people are out having fun in the face of this stuff. And I do think that's an important part. It's almost as if they want you to be afraid and not be happy and not be able to find fun. I feel like, I know that sounds a little absurd in some ways, like, come on, Micah, it's just a virus. We're trying to take the best measures. Well, I don't know if it's just a virus anymore, because look how much of the economy they're blaming on it and all that stuff. So, I mean, we've got some local articles I meant to tell you about, Derrick.
I want to, you mentioned, since you mentioned that, I want to go ahead and just jump into that one while we're getting into local, because you mentioned, well, maybe you feel like it's a good thing. And I know that we probably have some listeners that shirk away from that idea that it could be a good thing that people go out. Because even this week, just yesterday, actually, when we're recording this on Tuesday, so on Monday, Newsweek.com, national mainstream outlet, reported Texas coronavirus cases rise as Houston mayor says we're not equipped to handle projected surge. The city of Houston can't handle a sudden surge of COVID-19 cases, the mayor's warned, as infections could rise in the reopening state. Mayor Sylvester Turner confirmed on Sunday that fire marshals would start to enforce health policies in place to limit the spread of novel coronavirus in bars and clubs, which are only supposed to be permitted to open with 25% occupancy, as we just said. The mayor expressed disappointment after videos and images taken at local Memorial Day celebrations showed some businesses overcrowded with many citizens appearing to ignore social distancing measures while lacking face coverings. And it goes on to say that in Harris County, where Houston is located, health service data shows there have been over 10,000 cases, the largest of any county in the state. But of course, Harris County is the largest county in the state and second largest in the country. But one new projection model suggested the region could see 2,000 new cases by June. But of course, cases alone doesn't really mean anything, Micah. When they say that, it's as if every case means a death or means like super traumatizing. Some people have it or have apparently got it, we've been told, and haven't really been sick and said, I made it through. Other people are like, it was like a nightmare, so I don't know. It seems to affect people differently. So, but anyways, Turner says, we're not equipped to handle that type of surge. We can take about 200 cases a day with contact tracing. And there we go. We talked about that recently, contact tracing, which is, of course, another kind of euphemism, like what do they call torture, enhanced interrogation. Contact tracing could just be another word for surveillance, because it's what it really is when it comes down to it. Yes, I understand people think it's the best intentions to slow the spread of the virus and to track it, but regardless, it's surveillance, it's tracking. It's called health surveillance. It's a thing. Look it up. And he says we're building up to that program of contact tracing. There are people who still think it's a joke. It's not a joke. Things have opened up. We're in stage 2 in the state of Texas. So bars, restaurants, barbershops are open. We're nervous, but we're going to do everything we can to manage the virus. Chief of Houston Fire Department Samuel Pena said yesterday that around 300 complaints of COVID-19 linked violations have been lodged since Friday. And this is what I'm talking about, Micah. Over the weekend, 300 people around Houston felt the need to call the fire department, and who knows if they called the cops or elsewhere.
Good God.
Complain about their neighbors being outside. And these are what, just so the listeners who are on the radio might not be as clued into the internet lingo, but these are what we call Karens. It's if you haven't heard it, you might be a Karen. Okay, the Karen is the kind of person that I said, sometimes we call them snitches, but they're just nosy, busybodies in people's business. Images and videos of packed out bars, clubs, and water parks circulate on social media over the weekend. So yeah, I'll kind of end it there. But yeah, Micah, so you from your perspective, like you're saying, you feel like it's a good thing for people to go out and enjoy themselves and have a good time. And of course, it is the Texas governor that is reopening the state. For whatever that's worth. So the mayor is kind of complaining about it, but the state is trying to reopen. So the mayor can say, like, we're worried, this and that, and it could be one's a Republican, one's a Democrat. So maybe it's just a political thing. But I also want to note that just a couple of
Lena Hidalgo and the mayor, there's these billboards now to mask up Houston, and it's got their two faces on it, helping everybody like identify them politically, who they are, to remember them, and that symbol, that mask, whatever it means to people, because it seems like it means diverse things in different scientific studies and different groups and such. So I'm not sure, but these billboards are showing up. And people say they've seen them before, but I'm starting to see them on a route I drive regularly that I didn't before. So maybe that message, they're trying to propagate it more, expand it. I wonder, how that's paid for and what's the justification for that? Because I'm sorry to go on a tangent, but I see, it's based on what we're talking about, but I see contradictory evidence about the validity of these face masks even being able to help people, plus the way they compromise individuals' immune systems. So I think one thing about seeing everybody out in Bolivar and at the parks, one more moment, and I'll stop. One about seeing that you went here a moment, about seeing the people out, though, is it does show that certain people are out of step with the people. If these people want to be out in hundreds of people on the beach, then some about 1 to 5 people going there and telling them, hey, you shouldn't be doing this. They're out of step with the people, so.
Well, I was just joking with you, Micah, saying, whoa, you're challenging the narrative. And that's not really allowed in polite conversation anymore. You're not allowed to say that, hey, maybe masks don't do what we're told, or hey, maybe the numbers aren't what we're told. But hopefully, KPFT remains the place where people can have diverse discussion. Of course, Free Thinker Radio, we're always about that, discussing all kinds of outside the box ideas and things that might be controversial. If you're watching the video, we're showing an article, and I'll read the title to you guys listening, from NPR. So this is not some conspiracy website, for those of you who might be concerned about that. U.S. field hospitals stand down, most without treating any COVID-19 patients. This is reported May 7th. And this includes one of the ones in Houston that was in the NRG Stadium parking lot that was put there by Harris County Commissioner Lena Hidalgo and the Commissioner's Court, and then was basically voted to take down because it hadn't seen any patients and it was costing millions and millions of dollars. This one says more than $660 million, according to an NPR analysis of federal spending records. And this is just federal, doesn't count state things like Texas and elsewhere. The Army Corps of Engineers mobilized, hiring private contractors to build emergency field hospitals. This cost $660 million. But nearly 4 months into the pandemic, most of these facilities haven't treated a single patient. And they go through and they show the cost, they show the contractor, they show the maximum beds under contract, and they show the number of patients. And if you look through this list, there's quite a few that are listed with zero. Zero, zero, zero. Of course, there's places like, say, New York, when they have 1,000 listed, but that's kind of not the average at all. The next highest number is 39. The next one's 37. Then there's a bunch of zeros. And they have this evidence in the report here. Of course, this is from NPR. But yeah, Mike, I'm just kind of adding to what you were saying there, that there's these reports that are going on that are not really part of the narrative and that we're not really being told. And yet the mayor is kind of warning that the city might not be capable of handling some surge. And I'm just curious where this surge is coming from if they just decided to close down these hospitals. And I did see the World Health or the Washington Post report something similar, that the South was going to get hit by a surge, but I haven't really seen. I mean, I guess the idea is that because people are going outside, it's going to happen again. It's going to spread, but I mean, that fear could last a long time. Yeah. Anyways, I don't want to get too lost in that. I know we got some more Texas stories. Mike, do you want to say anything else about this one?
Oh, goodness. No, I think we'll probably end up talking about it when we slip into it more and more. I don't think there's much to say. I do think it's interesting talking about the cases rising, talking about the contact tracing, those two articles in conjunction. But yeah, that's a good amount of money there, $295 million contact tracing deal. I know we spent last episode on that, so I don't know, how far you want to go into that one.
I mean, I'll just add to this. So, like you said, we were just talking about millions of dollars for hospital beds in Houston. Now, the Texas governor, Greg Abbott's getting criticized for his contract for $295 million to build what some governors and some politicians have called a contact tracing army. The state of Texas wants, I think, 1,000 contact tracers, and they're offering pretty high-paying amounts of money to get people in there. Then we got the city of Houston is looking for, I think, 300 contact tracers, and Harris County is looking for 300. So altogether, about 600 people in the Houston area and another 1,000 around the state. And we don't really know what kind of powers they're going to have. And this article here from governing.com just mentions that East Texas Representative James White, a Republican from Hillister, says that legislative oversight of the contract is needed, the contract with the company to do the contact tracing. And he called on Abbott to convene a 30-day special session before decisions are made. And he says, quote, "I'm concerned about privacy. I'm concerned about the amount of monies that are being extended with very minimal legislative oversight and management. We've got to get in the foxhole with the governor. We've got to own up to this. This is nothing we can wait on." And he said he's made it clear that MTX, which is the company that is apparently going to get the contract, must protect personal privacy of Texans. So yeah, the struggle over privacy and the fight over contact tracing continues, and this is going to be the thing happening all around the country and really all around the world. No matter where you're listening or watching from, if you're not in Houston, if you're not in Mexico, you're not in the U.S., it's happening in your area. I guarantee you, because this is part of the global health strategy that's being put forth by the World Health Organization, which also happens to be funded. The number 2 funder behind the United States of the World Health Organization is Bill Gates, who we'll be talking about in just a few moments. But those are the people putting forth the policies and calling for immunity passports, which we're going to talk about in the second half of the show too. Contact tracing, mask, physical distancing, mandatory thermal scanning. I mean, just all kinds of stuff, Micah, that we have been warning about for years is now being put into place.
Well, this may sound a little bit strange, but sunshine and exercise and all that's supposed to be really good for your health, right? And being isolated, you don't get, any engagement of your immune system. And then putting a mask on top of it is supposed to affect your breathing and stuff. So I start to wonder, could it be maybe like a big experiment? So we all got to get, see how the human body reacts when deprived of these things. That's a bit crazy in some ways, but at the same time, think about it. While we all just submit to, this is something that we talked about with the healthcare bill. Even, once they have this information, how will it be used? I mean, at this point, what rights do we have to our own body? We're told we're not supposed to go out. We got to stay home. We're going to have our fevers, our temperatures checked, all these things. We might have to get injections, all kinds of things, And I think these is very fast with very little information coming directly from the medical community to the people. Like there's no we don't get to read articles with a whole bunch of different doctors talking about these things. Occasionally we'll see a YouTube video that's from boots on the ground doctors, and they'll remove it, So I think that's a very strange thing. It's almost like we're not being treated like adults who can evaluate things. And if we're compromised, stay at home. If we're not, run our business. It's like we're not being trusted with the truth, that it's like we keep getting things like fear and hope and force being the things that we're supposed to make our decisions on, rather than reason and an understanding of the truth. So I feel like it's almost like the authorities are treating us like children rather than like equals and everybody, like that. So I don't know, just waxing a bit there.
No, I agree with you. And I think most people in our audience would agree that the state, this is why people call it the nanny state, isn't it? Because they literally try to be people's nannies or be in charge of people's lives. And, this is something that we as free people, if we choose to be free, we need to challenge that and push back that and have some personal responsibility, a sense of personal responsibility, and take responsibility for our actions and the things that we do in our lives. Otherwise, these people feel justified or
Wow. Yeah, I think you're entirely right, Derek. And I guess we're having a little bit of technical difficulty here, and hope you show back up in a moment. But one thing that is interesting with regard to this is, you're right, these people do feel justified, but I think everybody's got a way to have the discussion. Everybody's got a way to continue this. I think maybe I need to leave the studio, in fact, because I don't know if Derek can get back in this. We'll find out. But nonetheless, I think we'll move on with the Houston news for a little bit and get this one, because, you were talking about, just trust the authorities, and that's how they get away with this. One thing I was thinking about, just from the Houston area, you can think whatever you want about the drug war, the drug laws, etc. But as an officer of the law, you'd think that they would want to obey the law. So it turns out, one thing I think is interesting is here locally, and then I'd like to move on, is that there's been FBI investigation to find they're actually offering a reward of $5,000 for the information leading to the arrest of a former Harris County constable who was basically escorting drug dealers around and keeping them safe. So, all right, I'm going to stop my cam, people. I appreciate it if you're live streaming. I'm going to try to find out what happened to Derek, and if I do that, this will be a boring show. So, all right, I'll be back. Lame. Don't know what's up with Derek. Tried to reach out to him elsewhere. Maybe he's having a solar flare. Oh my goodness. How frustrating. See, I don't have the ability to put the articles up and that sort of stuff because I don't have the technology. Anyway, so let's see if he said anything here. Nope, I don't have any extra private chat. So I'm going to let y'all people go. Appreciate everybody tuning in. And if we can get back on in the next few minutes, we will. And if not, I don't know what we'll do. But thanks for all the support, and thanks for joining the conversation. Got a lot of notes here about Bill Gates, so we want to have that conversation, whether it's now or next week. So talk to you soon, y'all. Yeah. Love you. Bye.
Yo, did I lose Micah? Micah, are you there? All right, guys. Sorry, my computer crashed. I guess Micah bailed. We'll continue the show. My computer crashed for the second time today because, as I told you guys, I've been working on my Bill Gates series for the last few days, and my computer literally is filled with tabs right now for Bill Gates. And so I need to get that done quick. Michael will be back in just a moment, though. But thank you guys for watching, for listening. I don't know where my camera froze or when that was. But what I was trying to say to Micah and kind of this whole thing is this, that as you guys know, most of us, we're not allowed to ask these questions. We're not allowed to look at alternative information like the article that I'm presenting right now. For those of you who are watching, and if you're listening, this is from The Telegraph, and the title is "Lockdown Saved No Lives and May Have Cost Them," Nobel Prize winner believes. Professor Michael Levitt of Stanford University predicts that the UK will be rid of COVID-19 within weeks. Now, some people are going to see that and not agree with, like, without a doubt, some people would see that and call it crazy. And, you know, that's fine. Like, you don't have to agree with the topic or the title, but the goal is to read the information, to read it and to understand it and to try to get to know it a little bit better, right? Professor Michael Levitt of Stanford University predicts that the UK will be rid of COVID-19 within weeks. So this was May 23rd, just a couple days ago. And of course, if this is wrong, people will attack this guy. He'll probably lose his job. But he is challenging Professor Neil Ferguson, who has been the government advisor who, as you guys know, he developed the Imperial College modeling, which most governments have used, talking about the virus and how bad it was supposed to be. So this is somebody that should be credible and should be, you know, have the right credentials or whatever. But I guarantee you, if I share this with somebody, they'll say he's crazy. But if this same professor was backing up the mainstream narrative, it probably would be supported without question. And that's a very dangerous place to be. So I just want to get that across, that, you know, we're dealing with times where people aren't allowed to really even question things that are being put before us. So, yeah. So, Mike, I don't know if you just saw that article I was kind of going over, if you've seen that headline from a Nobel Prize winning professor from Stanford University saying that the lockdown, in his view, saved lives and may have cost them. And he thinks that the crisis will be over within weeks if people just let it run its course and get herd immunity. And he's criticizing Professor Neil Ferguson of the Imperial College. So, yeah, just kind of going into that whole thing, man, as a piggyback to what we were just talking about a few moments ago, that there's so many things that are not allowed to be questioned anymore.
Yeah. And it's not just, I don't know. And you're right, though. It does, you get this collective mentality out there where, you know, anyone that goes against the grain is, you know, stands out. What, instead of a bunch of different ideas talking about what's happening and explaining what can be known, it's almost like something is dogmatically being, you know, pushed forward. You showed me that I didn't want to go too far from Houston real quick, because I've seen a lot of outcry over one of those articles, that news clip you showed me, where they had that individual down there putting their knee in his neck.
That's what I wanted to go into next.
I didn't know. I was thinking, you know, we got these two examples of people here, of situations where authority is kind of unchecked. We've got the one where the FBI is looking for one of the former Houston constables for escorting criminals around. They're actually drug dealers, I guess, and you can feel any way you want about the drug war and still think that, you know, a guy getting paid on government time, on city time, to escort drug dealers around with 5 kilos of coke in the car might not be the best use of resources, no matter how you feel. But I thought it's interesting because, you know, people tend to just trust the authorities. Normally we have the different school stories, but with school out, we don't. But, you know, we don't have, it doesn't seem like we've had a thinning out of the beatdowns, because there's been a number of them. And some of them you may even argue are justified. There was this one where a gospel singer was recently, it ended up in dying. And when the police showed the family cried and cried to get the video, and had to basically stir up the community to even get the video. But once they saw the video, they didn't want it released. I imagine it was something that embarrassed them for their loved one. But I feel like, how do you get a gospel singer so worked up that this is going on, whether they're drunk or on drugs or whatever? I don't know. But let's get into this one. I'm just trying to say, this ain't the only one lately.
No, there's not, man. And I've seen some stuff. It was circulating online. Maybe you guys saw it on your social media feeds, where there was a young mother who was at a lockdown protest in Australia. And again, whatever you feel about that, what happened was the cops ended up grabbing this woman, ripping her child out of her arms, literally pulling them apart while the child's screaming, because she was at a lockdown protest and they said she wasn't doing enough physical distancing. And then they literally grab her, open up a paddy wagon, throw her in the back like an animal, slam the door on her, and like drive off with her. I mean, and we could recount a number of examples. What I'm playing for those who are watching on screen now, we're not going to put the audio because it's not family friendly, but it is a video that was posted yesterday, and it has just about 19 hours ago, so Monday, and it has almost 1 million views now. I imagine by the time you're listening to this on KPFT on Friday, it's going to be over 1 million for sure. And what we're witnessing is Minneapolis police, 2 officers, one who is clearly holding a man down. They claim this guy was kind of acting erratic. They came to arrest him. They tried to put him in the back of the car, and they thought he had medical problems. So they start holding him down. That's their story. But where the video begins, the cops have him right outside the back rear of the vehicle on the right side. And from the very beginning of the video, this cop has his knee right in this guy's neck, like not, kind of softly, but he's got his knee down in this guy's neck. You can hear him gurgling and crying for help, and people around him are filming. They're, it's the same old thing, Micah. People film, they complain. They're like, you're crazy. Stop doing that to him. Look, you can see in the video, this guy's barely alive. And one of the cops is just standing there. And as the people try to get closer, the cop kind of gets up in their face like he's going to do something. The cop that's actually holding the guy pulls out his mace can, and there are bystanders filming. They're trying to tell him, like, look, the guy's not responsive. I mean, please get off him. And sure enough, Micah, this guy dies. He's dead. He's dead as these cops, for whatever reason, hold him down. I mean, you can see this video. It's disturbing. Like, we're looking at a dead man now. And this happened in Minneapolis yesterday. I was just being told by one of our listeners, there's protests going on right now, happening on the scene, tonight, because in response to this. And we'll just show a couple of quick articles from the International Business Time. Minneapolis man killed by police. Video shows officer with knee on victim's neck. Now, let me tell you how sick this makes me, Micah. Minneapolis man, you see the quotations, killed by police. What does that even mean? The guy's dead. He was obviously killed. But the media is so afraid to call it what it is. We got this other one from the Minneapolis Star-Tribune. Minneapolis police and protesters clash almost 24 hours after man's death in custody. Every title that I've seen, they've hesitated to call it what it is. And this is, I would say it's a murder. Maybe not legally yet, but we're also got this. This is 10 minutes ago, just reported Minneapolis Star-Tribune. Rubber bullets, chemical irritant, water bottles, and air as thousands march to protest George Floyd's death. We're looking at firsthand, guys. This is breaking like right now as we're on the show. These protests in Minneapolis where the people are apparently getting rubber bullets and tear gas sprayed at them. There are thousands of people in the streets right now marching over this man's death. And that is great to hear, I would say, because unfortunately these things happen too often and people don't stand up. And the other sad thing, and this is controversial, Micah, we've talked about this a little bit, but I mean, how long are people going to just stand by and film and just let another person get killed? I mean, they tried to come a little bit closer to the officers and get them to calm down. He pulled out his pepper spray can. The other one put his hand on his taser. They both got guns. I'm not calling for anything. I'm just saying people need to be better equipped to handle these things and recognize that they're going to keep happening until the police know that that people aren't going to accept it.
You're right, Derrick. It's a matter of force, though, as sad as it sounds. You have to hold people accountable, whether you can do this through your governing body or not. That's a whole different question. But you asked this question of how long until they stop filming. And I guess until they feel they've hit critical mass on the other side of the camera and that the blatant injustice before them is too much to stomach and they're moved by their identity and whatever to act and to stand up for justice. Well, you would think that an officer of the law or a peace officer would be doing by nature, but when you see them doing something contradictory, I'd almost feel like, yes, you have to say something, you have to film it, get the word out so that this person can't do it to others. But at the same time, I do think it hits a point where, no, they're not going to do much until they hit critical mass because you're up against guns and tasers and authority and all that stuff. So I don't know, maybe there needs to be a hotline where they can call and they can flash like a symbol, in the sky and everybody run over there with cameras and be like, hey, and then they hit critical mass. And I don't know. Do you think how many cameras have to surround them before they stop killing someone?
Obviously, the cameras aren't doing enough. And I know it's controversial to some people, but I really do think that if we can't defend and protect our communities from any kind of invading force and violent person that means us harm, whether they're wearing a badge, because as you know, Micah, and as our audience knows, badges don't grant extra rights. And just because somebody's an officer shouldn't just give them immunity with murder and with doing these kinds of things, or raping children, or all the different things that we've covered. Obviously, not all cops. Don't call the station freaking out. We're not saying all cops, but these things do happen. And I really think, like, for example, again, I'm here in Mexico. I'm 2 hours away from a little town called Cherán, Mexico, in Michoacan, the state of Michoacan. 8 years ago, they kicked out all the corrupt cops, the corrupt politicians. They banned all political parties. They kicked the cartel out because they were logging their area. And they went back to their own indigenous form of community governance. And I'm not saying that is even plausible in the United States. But to me, it's like, when people get desperate, when these things happen, they pick up with the way they did it. They had sticks and rocks and grandmothers chasing these corrupt people out of their town, and then they took the weapons from them, and they've protected and defended their community for the last 8 years. And now they're living and they're doing their thing and they're developing their way of life. My point is they got to that point where they felt like that was their only, course of action that they could take to, find some justice. And I wonder if and when those days might hit the United States. But let's go hit a song, Micah. We've been going on for a minute. We're going to get into some, who do we got next? What do we got?
I think we got Ganesha. We're going to shoot that. We're going to show that video, Ganesha, Blood Moon Rising live, I think.
Yeah. And that's a good, that's a good video after watching that guy unfortunately lose his life. It's maybe it's just a good rock out and let some of your rage out a little bit, right?
It'll work. There are some dark things going on, but the best thing we can do is be prepared to deal with it. We can't predict everything that's going on, but if we can just, kind of keep our head, have some happiness and enjoy some music and tend our gardens, maybe we'll be better when we come in for a landing on the other side, whatever that means.
Absolutely. And by the way, everybody, his name was George Floyd. This is Freethinker Radio, 90.1 KPFT Houston, the Conscious Resistance. We'll be right back. This is Ganesha, Blood Moon Rising. Stay tuned. All right. Welcome back to 90.1 KPFT Houston, the Conscious Resistance, Facebook, all that good stuff. My name is Derrick Bros. I'm here with Micah Jackson. How'd you enjoy that?
No doubt. It's good to be able to hear the music and see the live video. I mean, we had just gotten to where we were live streaming the shows where we had to shut down KPFT, and we were talking about some critical information right before we went to the music break about people being killed in the streets, basically by people wearing the same clothes, and Minneapolis, man's knee being stomped on by people sit around filming it. I think that's pretty absurd. And you mentioned the fact that a lot of people might be like, hey, how dare you question this and wonder about it. But I thank goodness that there is a station like KPFT where we can talk about brutality such as that and question the narrative. I mean, if we can't talk and we can't communicate about ideas, then I feel like we've lost freedom. Because if you can't stand up and say something, even to the point that you just don't understand something and have a discussion about it, there's not much hope for humanity. So thank goodness for KPFT. If you're moved just a little bit by this show, please do what you can to support KPFT in its time of need. A little bit, anything, go to kpft.org. We are still having to keep just about as much money to keep the station running. I mean, all they're probably down is a little bit of electricity by having it shut. The licensing fees still go on. The tower has to keep broadcasting. So thank you to everybody that both shares this show, thumbs up, comments, and considers contributing to KPFT, who are so gracious as to give us a platform to speak to millions of people, possibly every single week. And we couldn't do it without them in some way. And thank goodness. Please help where you can. And if you'd like to find ways to help, feel free to reach out to our Facebook page. And there's lots of ways we can plug you in. So thank you much.
And you guys might notice that there's a person missing tonight. Johnny did not show up. Our buddy, our co-host and producer, Johnny, is not here tonight. We're missing you, Johnny. Well, hopefully you'll join us again next week. We've got about 25 minutes left in the show here with you guys. And of course, the theme is, will the real Bill Gates stand up? And we're going to get into that in just a moment. But I do have two other ones, Micah, that kind of relate to our overall conversation about contact tracing. And I guess the theme that in addition to Bill Gates is it okay to still ask questions? Is it okay to still ask questions about the fact that the U.S. government is launching Operation Warp Speed and trying to rush vaccines by the end of the year at a rate never previously seen before for any vaccine, trying to compress 10 years worth of research and trials into months and release it? I hope so, because just yesterday, Reuters reported this, Micah, that the U.S. plans massive coronavirus vaccine testing effort to meet the year-end deadline, because Donald Trump has said that he wants the vaccine delivered by the end of the year, if not sooner. And the health authorities are all saying, yes, they can do this, if not by at the latest January 2021. Of course, Bill Gates and others are saying we're not going back to normal until we vaccinate the entire world. The United States plans a massive testing effort involving more than 100,000 volunteers and a half dozen or so of the most promising vaccine candidates in order to deliver a safe and effective one by the end of 2020, scientists told Reuters. The project will compress what is typically 10 years of vaccine development and testing into a matter of months. Testimony to the urgency to halt a pandemic that has infected more than 5 million people. To get there, leading vaccine makers have agreed to share data and to lend the use of their clinical trial networks to competitors should their own candidate fail. Candidates that demonstrate safety in small early studies will be tested in huge trials of 20,000 to 30,000 subjects for each vaccine. Between 100,000 and 150,000 people may be enrolled in the studies, said Dr. Larry Corey, a vaccine expert at Fred Hutchinson Cancer Center in Seattle. Anyways, the whole point here is that this thing is being pushed forward as part of a public-private partnership called ACTIVE, Accelerating COVID-19 Therapeutic Interventions and Vaccines. And as I told you guys last week, Micah on Freethinker Radio here, we were talking about Bill Gates and some of his investments in the company Moderna, who's one of the people who is fast-tracking their vaccine. And they also have therapeutics in the form of what they describe as miniature implantable devices that can be used via vaccines. And that's setting off some conspiracy theories, if you will, in some people's minds, some concerns. But I mean, even this alone, without even getting into conspiracy land, the fact that they just said on a mainstream outlet, 10 years worth of vaccine development and testing is being compressed into months in order to treat this pandemic. And I don't know, does that make you feel confident about this whole situation, Micah?
I don't feel confident about it. I told you I need to see a whole bunch of different doctors talking about it. I know they got them all like packed in a certain place and they're saying, here it all is. There's no real articles out there like, that are comprehensible and I don't know. It doesn't make me feel confident. I don't feel like enough research has been done, but I'm not in that field. So at the same time, yeah, it's a frustrating thing. I don't think that I trust putting a device in my body. That sounds pretty invasive and questionable, even at best. Like, even if I had a sports injury or something and they want to put a pin in my knee or something, I'd want to really understand what that meant. I think there's going to be a whole bunch of people rushing off to get devices put in their bodies and not know what they mean. I'm sorry.
And that shouldn't be an odd question, right, to ask, though. I mean, like, if somebody hears this, one of our listeners hears, oh, well, 10 years worth of research compressed into months? Well, that's a little disturbing to me. I'd like to know more. But it seems like even that question alone will get you called anti-vaxxer. And,
honestly, Derek, I don't think time works that way. I don't think you can do 10 years of research in a few months.
They seem to think
the virus's run is working the same way.
They seem to think so, man. So, it's disturbing, right? People are, I just want our audience who, again, we're talking to people on the internet. We're also talking to people across Houston who might be tuning into 90.1 KPFT Houston, driving around Houston and hearing this and wondering how the heck they got here. Well, you're listening to Freethinker Radio, but we're trying to get you to think about the real implications of the situation, that there are people who aren't crazy conspiracy theorists who, think everything is fake and whatever. Those people exist, but there are genuine, normal, everyday, average people who have legitimate questions. And, Micah, we're going to try to get an interview maybe next week. For some of you might know, his celebrity chef is one of his titles. His name's Pete. He's an Australian celebrity chef. And he recently has been attacked for going on FM radio, kind of like ours, and asking questions about the coronavirus vaccine. And so now he's being attacked in the Australian media, and they're calling it the information war. And Micah, also last week, the New York Times said we are in the middle of a vaccine information war. So it's just crazy to me that even asking questions is being lumped in like this. And we're also being told, like you said, time doesn't work that way. You can't just turn 10 years into a couple of months. But I digress. Let me just jump into the next story as we only got about a short amount of time with you guys. We want to get into a lot of things. We got to get to Bill Gates and his wonderful life story. But
I don't think we have enough time to cover all of the Bill Gates stuff we need to.
We'll get into Bill Gates. And for those who are watching, we'll hang out a little bit longer. Unfortunately, our KPFT show is only 1 hour until we get 2 hours, which we're always looking for. But this one relates to another aspect. We talked about vaccines that are being rushed. What about this? Immunity passports to fly. The world's largest airline trade group has called for immunity passports, thermal screening, mask, and physical distancing to be a part of the industry's strategy for returning to normal operations. I don't know how that sounds normal, but the International Air Transport Association, which I'd never heard of till recently, they represent 299 airlines, including all the major airlines in the United States and Mexico, recently issued a publication called Biosecurity for Air Transport, a roadmap for restarting aviation. And I'm going to save you the details. I'll share this article. We'll put it on our Freethinker Radio Facebook page. But at the end of the day, they call for contact tracing, which we've discussed. They talk about using, it says, where possible, data should be collected in electronic form and in advance of the passenger arriving at the airport, including through e-visa and electronic travel authorization platforms. And then, Micah, I looked into that. What is an electronic travel authorization platform? Well, there's something called the COVID Pass, as in COVID-19, COVID Pass, COVID pass.com. Check it out. And then there's also, some of you might know that company Clear, that is at the airport, and you can buy their little pass and you get to skip ahead of the line. Well, now they're offering the Health Pass, which is, basically their digital ID, all-in-one, encompassing type thing, kind of like we saw almost a decade ago on Aaron Rousseau's From Freedom to Fascism, these interconnecting systems that have all your information. This one's from Clear, the Health Pass. It involves biometrics, a QR code. It says you can scan a person's temperature, scan their QR code, and then decide if you want to let them enter your venue. COVID Pass is a private company offering similar things. The world's most digital health passport, most secure digital health passport with patented technology, and on and on and on. The IATA also calls for restructuring airports to allow for physical distancing of more 3 to 6 feet between people, for face coverings. They also said we need to have a general move towards touchless technology and biometrics, facial recognition, thumbprints, retina scanning, these kinds of things. And so this is the future of flying. I mean, this is the largest airline lobby group in the world. That's been around for almost 70 years, I believe, and they're representing nearly 300 airlines. And they're putting out this as their roadmap to restarting aviation. And this comes just a couple of weeks after the TSA themselves had said that in certain airports in the US, starting with 3 and then probably expanding, they're going to be doing mandatory temperature checks. So that's the future of flying right there. Micah, are you going to be taking any flights? I mean, but seriously,
I got to get a pilot's license. I can't really fly in very many big planes once I have a pilot's license. I don't know how many people trust flying with me when I have a pilot's license. But yeah, I think that's about the only way I can do flying. That sounds very invasive. I barely can think of flying now. I've wondered why you were given that report about the how we see I spend a lot of time on the economic circuit, but I think about, you see Boeing and what trouble they've been through and how they're getting some assistance now with the stimulus. And you see about over and over how they don't let the bigs fail. Like they don't let them fail. And as you talk about this story, I start to wonder, how dependent do they make the bigs on the plan? How dependent do they make them so that they're part of the game, whether they want to be or not? So I want to look into legislation and see what kind of health stuff they've got, in requirement with these strings. And also you got to think about it when the lobby group is talking about how they're going to change flights to expect temperature checks and do the thing ahead of, health ahead of time and all these different things. That's going to be infrastructure that has to be put forth by the airport that they'll argue is for public health, that then they'll argue for health dollars for. So, I mean, I don't think I'm far-fetched in saying this thing's been exploited, financially every single possible way. Probably even before it hit, it was planned to use it as cover for a lot of financial things. And the reason I bring that up is a lot of people don't realize that we trade our time for a store of value, no matter what it is. And when they are affecting that, that's as much as making you a slave as putting nanobots in your body in a lot of different ways, because you work for it and then it's taken away either directly or indirectly and used for various causes like this that you may or may not support and may be in the opposite interest of your family.
Yeah, and it's like you said, it's coincidence, right, that the airlines get big bailouts and then they start pushing the same plan. And then the other thing that's disturbing to me is that for some people, and I've heard this already, well, then boycott those airlines, or, you don't have to fly, and it's like, yeah, I get that, right? I totally get that, right? Flying is not, it's not necessarily a right, but I think freedom to travel is. And these people, the state, they have built up these systems where we can't travel without going through them, right? Like, we can get your private license, Micah, we can try that. But at the same time, they believe they control the airwaves, right? So if you're up there in an uncharted flight, we're going to be having,
spreading the COVID
fighter jets next to us for you trying to transport some people across the city or whatever. But no, seriously, that's what I think it's going to come to, is if I really believe we're seeing society start to fracture off between people who are buying completely the mainstream sources and people who are questioning that. Now, that doesn't mean people are totally right on either side. But we see that, and then we see some people who are fully embracing this travel. These changes to travel. Like some people, I've had people in the last couple of days been getting sucked into Facebook debates, unfortunately, saying that temperature screenings to travel are not invasive, that immunity passports are not invasive, or it's just temporary. And, one good comment I wish I could pull up right now, I had a friend say, I had a buddy ask me, well, how long do you think this could happen? And he said, well, 20 years ago, somebody tried to light their shoe on fire and we still take our shoes off at the airport. And so if you think this stuff is just about the virus, it's going to go away. I mean, as Micah said, there's so many people. It's very much like a 9/11 event in the sense that there are people trying to take advantage of this and for their own economic purposes. So we really got to question what's happening here. And finally, we get to Bill Gates. And we've kind of touched on him a little bit throughout the night. Not like that. We've talked about him.
We talked about things he's interested in.
Yeah, and that's the thing is, I mean, the name it pops up over and over, right? He's funding this, he's funding that. So I want to bring your attention to my first little bit, Micah, actually, why don't you go ahead and start? I think you had some stuff, and then I'll take it a little bit. Maybe some of what we're talking about will kind of piggyback each other. But I know you had gathered some information on Bill Gates. This was our homework assignment for the last week. All three of us were looking up information about Bill Gates.
Quit telling on us. Quit
So I'll let you take it off and share.
We did not have time to prepare at all. This is just off my dome. No, you're right. You're right. And there's a lot of information out there. At first, I thought it was an odd assignment or an odd thing for us to take on, and we've been trying to take on these themes a little bit. So Bill Gates, I think we'll revisit him a bit, but one of the first things, so I'm out there, I kind of have that general understanding of Bill Gates that I think your average pop student has. He's, a guy who helped found Microsoft, some computer dude who thinks he's doing good in the world, and I kind of started from that. I wasn't sure, obviously I've heard through the grapevine all kinds of things about eugenics, et cetera, and he seems to be involved in a number of population control ideas and stuff like that. But my coming at it from that point of view, I just didn't want to already have condemned the man to some degree. So I was like, well, let's see what's out there, judge them by their fruit. Let's see what like his big baby Microsoft has done. And, without going too far, I discovered a lot of things, and one thing I thought about is I kind of, one of the things I watched was an old interview with Barbara Walters that he did, that this guy, Paul Allen, who's a movie director and a childhood friend of Bill Gates, who helped co-found Microsoft with him. So I'm like, okay, so this is a guy that knew him in his formative years as he, came into his own to help run Microsoft with this guy. And it took Bill Gates a long time to admit that this guy was 50% of the founding of Microsoft. And I thought that was kind of interesting. But the way this guy talked about Bill Gates' character, it kind of drew me into more, let me see if the company, what kind of philosophy the company's actions reflect. Because, he's obviously a cult of personality within Microsoft. He's the face of Microsoft, even if he does say at this point that Paul Allen was 50%. But so, without going too far, one thing that I thought, and maybe I'm cutting to the chase here, but one of the most alarming things I saw is they were the first company to partner up with the NSA on PRISM, the PRISM surveillance program. I'm sure you'll probably know about that and get more into that, Derrick. And that I feel in some ways that should be almost the last thing I get to. But let's just get going, because without much effort, you can find out that they've had many antitrust cases and found limiting. The one thing I thought was interesting is the way they would require original equipment manufacturers to preload Windows on systems. And in so doing, it made it more difficult for people to get computers that were not preloaded, much so the same way as our phones are preloaded with operating systems and such now. Computers and desktops and laptops were set up similarly. And it wasn't as if you could just ask to not have one preloaded. In fact, many OEMs were limited to the number that they were allowed. And in '98, there was an antitrust case regarding this. Then in 2006, there were numerous patent violations and court cases. From 2004 to 2007, their litigation bills with $4.3 billion, with $4 billion in payouts, plus another $300 million in legal fees. So, I think, some people will say that a company that big is going to have a lot of people making patent claims against them and legal fees, legal cases and such. But at the same time, I think, when we're talking about like, this is a business, this is, if you've got patent violations, you've got things where you tried to control the market by controlling what software was on the majority of PCs and desktops to the point that you were found, in violation in an antitrust case. It shows, one, that you don't really believe in competition, which if you don't believe in competition, you don't believe in the fairness in ideas. You're already taking an authoritarian stance just right there, whether you believe it or not. So I think there's lots of ways that the way we exchange and serve one another can show our philosophy, whether we're for freedom or whether we're for control. And when I read more and more about Microsoft, it sounds like they're about power, money, and control, because a little bit further I get into, many of y'all are young, but in the 90s, a lot of people were working temp. There was difficult times and people were working temp. Professionals were working temporary next to people that had jobs at Microsoft doing the same work. And they were actually kept temporary for many, many times. It got so bad that they had a word for this back in the 90s. It was called permatemps, because you wouldn't get health care. You wouldn't get anything except your pay, and that was it. And very few rights within the companies. And it got so bad that there was a lawsuit that started in 92. And by 2005, it settled. It turns out that almost 9,000 current and former employees of Microsoft were complaining about the working situations, and some of them were illegal. It got so bad that company, rather than fight it, just settled $97 million. And like I said, the two that really hit me the most as far as indicative about their behavior was not just the way they were anti-competitive and didn't care about the people that worked for them, and had all these legal fees, and tried to control the market by making everybody have Windows by putting it on the machines. The things I found most troubling were the way that they were the first company to sign up with PRISM. Now, we know Google and Yahoo and everybody else has done that too, and that's the National Security Agency's program. But then also, they are one of the companies, just like so many of the other tech companies, that was willing to work with authoritarian regimes in countries such as China to curtail free speech and to use this to monitor people. So we already know if they would do that there, that they'll do that. At the same time, they don't seem to believe in competition. They don't believe in a free exchange of ideas. They believe in control and authority. And that's just looking at the company Microsoft. And you can say, well, that's not Bill Gates. Well, the years I researched it are the Bill Gates years. Once, everything I talked about was under his stewardship, his head, and then to a certain degree, I do believe when you're a cult of personality in a company like that, you do have some responsibility for what that company does. Now, whether it's real or perceived, we can discuss the levels of that, but yeah. So what's up?
Yeah. So, I mean, I'm glad you brought up all those points. And again, I think even that, Micah, which some would say is kind of a more of the mainstream things that they say about Bill Gates, right? Like even that stuff is not known. I saw one poll for the article I wrote saying that according to YouGov, whatever that's worth, that millennials and boomers love Bill Gates, but Gen Xers not so much. For some reason, the younger generation, which a couple of months ago, they released a Bill Gates documentary on Netflix, Inside Bill's Brain, which tells this very fabricated and PR, version of events about his life. And then maybe some of the older folks, like people remember, I remember getting Bill Gates' computer when I was young. So they have some kind of special place for him. But what we're showing on screen while you were talking, I was showing pictures of Bill Gates with Jeffrey Epstein, Bill Gates with Clinton and others, and he kind of runs in that same circle. So, you have the stuff where his own partner, Paul Allen, is saying he's a bully, he's sarcastic, he's crazy, he's kind of very just, some would say, driven, but then he's got the whole monopoly lawsuit, and, he still thinks that he was in the right on that, basically trying to create an entire monopoly. The government had to sue them, et cetera. And all that stuff is valuable. I also found some other things that I'm going to dive into now. We're starting to wrap up the show here on Freethinker Radio, 90.1 KPFT Houston, and The Conscious Resistance on YouTube. We definitely want to say again, please check out kpft.org for everybody who would like to keep us on the air and keep us reaching people in Houston, because it's nice to reach people through the internet, but it's also one other thing to reach people through the radio as they drive around the city. And I'm not going to read this whole article, but it's part one of a series I'm working on. Part two will be out tomorrow. So by the time you're hearing this on Friday on KPFT, you can go to the website, The Last American Vagabond, thelastamericanvagabond.com, and you can find it. It's called Bill Gates' Web of Dark Money and Influence. Part one I called Philanthropic Narrative Shaping. And it talks about more, it's kind of, I guess it goes perfect with what you were talking about, Micah, because you could describe the Microsoft years. And now we're talking about once he left Microsoft and he launches the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. And just like the man he was pictured with a moment ago, Jeffrey Epstein, and just like going back further, the Rockefellers and other billionaires and millionaires, people with wealth, they have used philanthropy to shape this narrative about who they are and to paint a certain picture that he's this hero here to save the world. And now people could argue that his programs have led to more vaccines in the world and have made people safer. I know there's some people who would argue that he has literally saved lives. I would kind of counter that with, we need hard evidence of that, and are the things he's really pushing for actually helping people. But just for a moment, kind of on the, again, not too far to the mainstream for people who look, there are plenty of reports from The Nation. They did a good investigation. Jacob and Mag, I found a German nonprofit, did a whole investigation into nonprofits, specifically focused on the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. And the long and the short of it is this: he's made billions of dollars from Microsoft, which was a monopoly of one sort or another, potentially screwed out his business partner, and then he took that money and dumped it into a foundation, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. And basically, we're able to then donate, and this is kind of weird to think about, donating to private companies and their tax deductible donations to private companies. And then Bill Gates also holds stock in many of those same companies. Many of them are vaccine companies, but that's not it. It's just, there's others. He's donated, he actually funds the entire global development section of the Guardian magazine, newspaper, online newspaper. He's given $9 million to them. $3 million to NBC Universal, $4 million to the French newspaper Le Monde, $4.5 million to NPR, $1 million to Al Jazeera, and $49 million to the BBC's Media Action Program, and many, many other. And you can just keep going on to his investments into Monsanto. And people have reported on that, how it's another form of colonization that Bill Gates' money is supporting in Africa, and all that that's led to, as well as funding what has been called a flawed clinical trial of the HPV vaccine in 2009, where a number of young girls were injured and 7 were killed because of the HPV vaccine that the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation found. That was found by the Indian Supreme Court. You can find that documented evidence if you look, for those who are skeptical. He's also funded controversial geoengineering techniques, which we've talked about on the show for years, could reduce clouds. I mean, could end up with gray skies. It could mess with the weather even more. They're trying to play God in some way with the weather. He's also invested heavily in different geoengineering companies. He's also invested towards developing antennas to accelerate the rollout of 5G. So a number of really controversial topics. That's just some basic searches. And then you start digging into who the foundation is invested in. And GlaxoSmithKline, Unilever, IBM, NBC Universal Media. The Gates Foundation has given $250 million to media companies and other groups to influence the news. They've also they hold corporate stocks and bonds in Merck, Novartis, GlaxoSmithKline, Vodafone, Sanofi, Ericsson, LG, number of startups, and it goes on. And so even back in 2007, the LA Times did an investigation into the Gates Foundation. I mean, the information is there for those who choose to dig in and look at that. And on part 2 of this, I'm going to be getting deeper to show how this web of people who are involved in the COVID-19 recovery are all connected by 1 or 2 degrees. That whole theory of 6 degrees of separation. Almost everybody involved with the COVID recovery, from Deborah Birx to Anthony Fauci, they're all connected to the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. Nearly every single organization, as I said earlier, World Health Organization, Gates funds them. He's the biggest funder now in the world behind the United States, and the U.S. is deciding whether or not they're going to continue to fund them, which will make him the largest funder of the World Health Organization. And in my second part, I also found evidence where previous investigations talking to more than 60 officials at the World Health Organization found that they say they literally treat him like a head of state when he shows up, that and they call it the Bill chill, that his influence and his words can chill, some people's thoughts and can influence and just basically shape the narrative and direct it where he wants to go because of his massive wealth and financial influence on the institution. So yeah. And, that's just the start of the Bill Gates. We're going to continue that conversation next week because I know you got more, Mike. I know Johnny did some digging, and I'll have more by next week's episode.
One thing I think is real interesting, just a little extra tidbit. There was a LA Times investigation in 2007 that found that $8.7 billion of the Gates Foundation assets were invested in companies that countered the foundation's goals, their stated charitable goals, their socially concerned philosophy. They included companies responsible for heavy air pollution in the Niger Delta, to pharmaceutical firms whose pricing policies have hampered access to retroviral drugs for those who needed it. So the point being, it seems like an expansion of some of the ideas that were going on: the lack of competition, control, profit at any cost. I mean, when he's got 8.7 billion in companies that are countering the very foundation of the charitable goals they have, what's the real goal? Basically to just keep the money going so that you can keep the image machine going. I don't know. Curious.
Yeah, crazy stuff, man. And like I said, we're going to continue the conversation about Bill Gates and the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. We'll keep diving into them next week. Hopefully, we'll have Johnny back. I just want to mention one story, Micah. We don't even have time for this, but I mean, I don't know if you heard this. The only place I've seen it written about is on Mint Press News, thankfully. But nobody really made a big deal. I guess you and I did, maybe a few others, about the huge cost of the CARES Act, the COVID, recovery thing. How many billions was that? Well, just this week, the U.S. Senate quietly approves $38 billion for Israel amid historic economic downturn. S3176 was passed without being named, debated, or even discussed, even though it would set into law the largest such aid package in U.S. history. We're going to have to get into this next time.
Are we buying that country? Are we buying that? I mean, we give them a lot of money. Are we buying that land? They don't seem independent. They need this money all the time.
The Senate Foreign Relations Committee quietly passed a bill on 21st to give Israel a minimum of $38 billion over the next 10 years, despite the ongoing devastation to the U.S. economy. And again, it wasn't named, so it's just S3176 if you want to look it up. Will now go before the full Senate since the legislation has already been passed by the House. If the Senate passes, it will go to the president to be signed into law. And I guarantee you it will, because Israel gets what it wants. And we have a bunch of people who support Israel.
Is it a hate crime about it?
It might be a hate crime. We might get taken off the air just for asking if this is fair, if this is legitimate, or, hey, should we actually question the Zionist influence over the U.S. government? And by that, I mean the Israeli Zionists, as many of them call them themselves, and as many in the U.S. government that used to be part of the Bush neocon era are still here now as part of the Trump neocon era, pushing the same thing. So amidst all this COVID thing, $38 billion going to Israel. Wow.
A lot of money.
All right, guys, we're going to end it.
But yeah,
we're going to end it here for the night. If you're watching, we'll hang around for a couple more minutes and answer some questions, but we're going to close out with a song. And thank you to everybody at KPFT, 90.1 KPFT, for always supporting us. We do invite you guys, look, wherever you're listening from, even if you don't live in Houston, even if you're never going to go to Houston, visit kpft.org, because with their help, we keep reaching minds and hearts across the Houston airwaves. And that's not small, that's nothing small. It's a big opportunity to continue reaching more people. But without community support, this station won't be able to last, and there will be one less commercial-free, corporate-free radio available. So thank you guys for listening. Anything else, Micah?
We love you. Love you guys. I love all these comments here. Thanks for tuning in to KPFT and all the support. Stay free, stay happy, do what you can, tend your garden, grow your savings.
Do all the things. We'll be right back if you're watching. And until next time, KPFT. Peace.
Put your hands up if you happen to follow and want a song talking about popping the bottles. Watch us in models, I'm not gonna bother. Got us a problem, can't stop it tomorrow. Gotta put your hands up if you happen to follow and want a song talking about popping the bottles. Watch us in models, I'm not gonna bother. Got us a problem, can't stop it tomorrow. Hello, my name is The Truth. Honest, only throwing the grenade in the booth. See me delete these beats out. I'm a white rapper like a TP'd your house. Put your hands up if you happen to follow and want a song talking about popping the bottles. Watches and models, I'm not gonna bother. Got us a problem, can't stop it tomorrow. Change to market Obama. Change you can believe will offer you nada. The same global elite are dropping the dollars. Republic of a puppet, the heart of the monster. Uganda and Gaza are products of anonymous economists and politicians calling the shots. Would you last if it happened tomorrow? Running down your block from an all-black chopper. Zoom like you hopped in a Mazda. Top chopped off, spotlight shined on you. Drive faster, they're starting to catch up. Get a megaphone, start yelling your ass off. This ain't Germany, if you came to murder me, I'm going to the top, so you better aim vertically. Okay, certainly, this ain't brain surgery, just change the teleprompter like I'm Ron Burgundy. Put your hands up if you happen to follow and want a song talking about popping the bottles. Watches and models, I'm not gonna bother. Got us a problem, can't stop it tomorrow. Eric, put your hands up if you happen to follow and want a song talking about popping the bottles. Watches and models, I'm not gonna bother. Got us a problem, can't stop it tomorrow.
That's what I call fear-mongering.
Pessimism, repetition, communism, terrorism. Pessimism, repetition, communism, terrorism. Pessimism, repetition, communism, terrorism. Pessimism, repetition, pessimism, repetition, communism, terrorism. Pessimism, repetition, communism, terrorism. Historical reminiscence, because this is repetitious. It's the new world order in the 60th edition. The mission isn't different if it's Hitler to the Clintons or the politicians sitting in trilateral commissions. The president's position has never been our decision. It's been given with permission in a one-party system. You think there's competition in between the opposition, but from Bush to Obama, there really isn't a difference. They wish to kill victims of the police state system, so I spit out bars to free us from the prison. I can sound pop to bait you in, then spit real talk like a bait and switch. Take those kids who never gave two shits and make them give one just based on this. Listen, new Rockefeller, old ambitions. They're all terrorists by their own definitions. Give a little kid a missile in the Middle East, tell them it's a competition to see who can live the least. They own television, that's why they don't mention the fact that Tower 7 was controlled demolition. Those in suspicion must be code for magicians, cause those sons of bitches were at home in their kitchens, funding the mission of the opposition, giving them guns and getting shot by our own ammunition. Turn off your television because they won't mention the fact that Tower 7 was controlled demolition. You can call me crazy, but go look it up. On 9/11, Tower 7 fell without getting touched. Jay Soul.
9/11 was done by people in our own government, our own banking system, to perpetuate the fear of the American people and to subordinating themselves to anything the government wants them to do. That's what it's about, and to create this war, this endless war on terror.
All right, guys. Thank you so much for watching today. This has been Freethinker Radio. That was Jay Soley, Tower 7. If anybody enjoyed that, he's an old friend and he's a truth warrior out there. He's got some skills spitting. I think Micah dipped out. We were going to talk for a couple more minutes, but maybe it's a good time to just say goodnight. I do want to say this, just a quick preview for those of you who actually watch Freethinker Radio, and you can see the name of my, where's it at? All right, here's Micah. You can see the name on my screen, Expose Bill Gates. There's Micah. Expose Bill Gates. I just want to tell you guys, we'll tell you here on Freethinker Radio first. This Friday, there's going to be an announcement about Expose Bill Gates Day. Myself and Freethinker Radio and some other independent media outlets and, just content creators are calling for an international global day of action using the hashtag Expose Bill Gates. And on June, I think it's Saturday, June 13th, but 2 weeks away from this week, we're going to be making some announcements. There's going to be memes going out and videos, and you'll hear about this on our channel and other channels, I'm sure. But just encouraging people to go out, host documentary screenings of James Corbett's really awesome 4-part series on Bill Gates, or some of the stuff we shared. Print it out, talk to people about it, hold banners, do info jamming, pass out flyers, do whatever. We want to try to do as fact-based, because that's the thing, is you don't even have to get into the crazy conspiracy theories when it comes to Bill Gates. There's plenty of information. So get people to go out and just have a single day of focused action. Like, hey, this guy, we shouldn't trust him. He's pushing us forward towards, vaccinating the whole world and contact tracing and lockdowns, and he's funding all this crazy stuff, and we should challenge it and question it. So what do you think about that, Micah?
I think that's pretty much the point, right? To question it, there's enough evidence out there, documented history of decisions made by bodies that this individual led to, kind of start to form an opinion that might not. I feel like the opinion that I am forming, as it's relatively new, is vastly different than what I kind of see in the feed, And I think as far as this idea of having a day or whatever where we speak about Bill Gates and share information, I think maybe at first I'm like, what's this, a witch hunt? But then after a little while, you see into this, and you're like, well, these cults of personality, they get away with doing all kinds of things once people just love them. So when they have this sort of history that isn't some conspiracy theory, these are actual court cases, the ones I talked about, and this sort of history like this, and that LA Times article that's over a decade old now, maybe they're thinking people just forgot some of these little oopses that came to light. But I feel like these things that have come to light might stand for a lot more than just a bunch of $1 billion being thrown at some good causes here. And if it's shown that billions of these dollars that are being created or that are being earned to be put into good causes are being earned in corrupt ways and corrupt, evil environments that actually work contrary to the cause, I feel like that's pretty profound too, because there's not a consistency of message once that's happening. So it's a big monolithic thing, Bill Gates. It's like, I remember once when I was a kid, they were like, Axl Rose from Guns N' Roses, you don't understand, I'm like a CEO now, I'm so big. Well, that's like, Bill Gates been a CEO since he was a teenager. So, at this point, he's, like you said, trying to play God. It's at that level. It's like bigger than the person anymore.
What do you think about that comment I put on the screen? Someone says, Misuchi Miss says, everyone knows, they just don't know what to do about it. And this is something I've been getting lately too, when people who because usually we're like screaming into the wind for the last 10 years, right, Micah? Just trying to get people to listen. And now it seems like for one reason or another, COVID or whatever, more people are listening, but they're just like, but what do we do? And, I try to put some answers forward, but I mean, I think it really taps into the fact there's a lot of people who are aware, who are scared that they're going to be forced vaccinated, who are scared that they're going to be, they can't travel without contact tracing, immunity passports or whatever. And they're like, I get it. What do I do? I mean, they kind of feel
that's
powerless.
what's a trap with our audience. We have a lot of people that are aware, that pay attention to Freethinker Radio. I think one of the little problems with that last statement was everyone knows. Well, I don't agree. I don't think we've hit that critical mass yet. Not when I see the feed, not when I see the world adoring him. It may be just that the world has bigger megaphones than Freethinker Radio. I don't know. But I don't believe everyone knows. So then what do we do? That's one thing, right? We continue education. We continue having discussions with family members and people that might love him or not, or even love the ideas that he represents, separate from the man, because they might not love Bill Gates. This might convince them not to support him, but they might still be down with, eugenics and nanobots, forced vaccinations, et cetera, et cetera. So I think we have to separate, these two issues: Bill Gates, this personality, this ghost thing that doesn't really exist that people have in their mind, versus the reality. So everyone knows. What do we do? I got some answers there, and I keep saying them. Tend our garden, take care of the people we love, smile, save what you can, because then we're more empowered to do something and to take care of those we love, and also to stay free. I mean, that's one of the reasons we have money, right? Is to stay free. We trade sometimes some of our freedom to do something to get some money, right? Well, that's stored up right there. So take care of your loved ones. Join in the Bill Gates information jam that Derrick's talking about. I forgot which day it is. What day is that, Derrick?
I think it's I don't know the exact date. If anybody wants to look it up, it's not this. It's 2 weeks away, so I think it's Saturday, June 13th.
But I do think it's important to offer solutions, and I'm glad in a way that someone asked for them, because I often feel that too. What else can we do? Well, if we're doing that and we're talking to the people that come to us and we're trying to expand our ability to be self-reliant, to be healthy, in all the ways possible, then we're doing everything we can in the face of this monstrosity. I think the road to hell was a government program,
Micah, you said that there was you found an interview with Barbara Walters, right? That was with Gates' former partner.
Paul Allen.
Yeah, look, check this out. I don't know what the heck this means, but just check this out. Let me show you. I know I shared this a couple weeks ago on the show. This picture here. So I don't know how easy it is for everybody to see, but this woman on the right in the red, Barbara Walters, And who's she here with? George Soros, David Rockefeller, William Gates Sr., Ted Koppel, Anthony Fauci, Ted Turner. And here's another picture, George Soros, David Rockefeller. That tall dude is William Gates Sr., Bill Gates' dad, Ted Turner, and then the rich ladies. And then this is from the event. This was December 10th, 2001, a couple of months after 9/11. First Andrew Carnegie medals awarded to 7 visionaries of modern philanthropy. And it just kind of goes in. And interestingly, it says that the Gates family was there. It says that the Gates family was receiving. So not just Gates Sr., who's pictured here, but maybe old Billy Boy was somebody here, somewhere around here, as was maybe his wife and his mom. But just interesting. Again, these are the philanthropists, right? Andrew Carnegie. He's another one of those old barons, right? That did the same thing. Then the Rockefellers. Then you got the modern Rockefellers. And I'll just pull this up here. This is from Jacobin magazine, which again is a left-wing magazine, not any sort of right-wing conspiracy. And this is from just a couple months ago, called The Philanthropy Hustle. And it talks about some of the same problems we were already describing. So, I mean, the information is abundant. You just got to look for it. And part of what you do is spread it. I mean, we have to spread the information, right? So, like, I agree with you. Not everybody does know, or we wouldn't be in this situation. A lot of people do know, but not everyone. And the goal, I feel, at least part of it, like, this is one of those situations, like, since the beginning of our show, we always try to tell everybody some solutions or have some positive news or something at the end. And there's not always a perfect answer, like, push the cops away, or I don't know, there's not like a practical thing. Sometimes the most practical thing you can do is literally just spread the word and tell more people and get more people asking questions and thinking about these things, because we unfortunately are in the minority. We are in the vast minority. I think our numbers might be greater than we realize because of the internet censorship and maybe kind of creating this illusion of how many people are really paying attention. But and for the most part, we definitely are in the minority of people who question these sort of things, and even who, like, this part that we're talking isn't going to be on KPFT. But even the things we said in the first hour of the show, for those of you who are listening, we could potentially get kicked off the radio for that, just for saying that there is alternative opinions about, the hospitals closing down, or that the masks might not work. Micah went there. It's like, oh, somebody at the station, or, a listener at the station, or a donor at the station might be offended by that and call in and say, these guys are giving out bad advice. It's going to get people killed. We've had people call in and say we shouldn't be on the show just for asking questions about vaccines. And that was without a pandemic. Now we're dealing with a pandemic and we're asking these questions. So, I mean, just be aware of that, guys. Of course, we heap praise on KPFT because we are thankful that we get to have an FM spot. But at the end of the day, we're not safe there either. We could potentially be run off there, just like we could be run off YouTube, just like we could be run off anywhere else. I don't know if you saw, or if I told you, Mike, I had another video taken down off YouTube a couple of days ago.
Yeah, that one had been up there for a little while.
Yeah, it's like a 2-month-old video.
There's no accounting for this, I forget his name, but that co-host of the Liberty Report over there with Ron Paul had been taken off Twitter a while back and such. There's no accounting for it. All we can do, I'm so glad that we were able to broadcast on all these other alternative platforms that I don't even know about, just to reach people, DLive, etc. I don't know. There's a good question. What do we do about that? Because even in the days, if you didn't run a printing press, you might still be able to, create some pamphlets. Now it's hard to see a pamphlet as, or a flyer or as info jamming in that sense as productive as we tend to think of with social media. And that's kind of frustrating because that's already distancing before COVID in a way.
And it can feel frustrating. Like, for anybody who's never gone to the street, you might go to the street for, say, 3 hours and you talk to a couple hundred people on a busy day, right? Or you got a group of people. Obviously, the more people, the better. So say you got a group of 5 to 7 people and you're at a major festival in your area, and you go out there and you each talk to 50 people over a couple of hours. You hit a few hundred people. You could even hit maybe 1,000 people, but you're going to get a small percentage that are going to take the flyer. But then at the same time, Micah, like, maybe that's less than you would get in relation to likes on social media. But how many of those likes actually translate to real world action? I feel like when we're in the streets and we talk to somebody face to face and we're like, hey, yeah, we're a group, we're passing out flyers about this, like with the Houston Freethinkers, somebody would always be like, oh, wow, I didn't know people were doing this. Cool. I want to come get involved. And that, if that person actually gets involved, that to me has a longer impact than somebody who just clicks like but never does anything,
totally.
Beyond that.
Yeah, you're totally right. That's important, and that's one of the things you can do is engage with the people around you, because A lot of them, like you said, they, even if they're just inspired that someone's out there trying to reach people. Yeah. Good stuff.
Sometimes that's the best we can do, but we're going to leave it there, guys. Thanks for listening to us. We'll be back. We're going to try to get this consistent Tuesdays at 8 p.m. Every week you'll see us here broadcasting, and next week we'll have Johnny with us. All right, man.
Take it easy. See y'all later. Thank you.
All right. Peace, everyone.
Peace.